for the next of my poison books, I read Lucrezia Borgia by Sarah Bradford. And this is a very, very thorough examination of the Borgia family. It actually doesn't focus on Lucrezia as much as you would think, just because the complication of the time period is so much that the author's trying to focus on the politics that were going on, and Italian politics in the Renaissance were insane. I can't prove it anywhere because I cannot find anywhere that he references anything other than talking about that he got his inspiration from the War of the Roses. But I would have to say George R.R. Martin took a page out of the politics that the Borgias were doing. I know people have made that connection in the fact that you had the sibling relationship that was going on. I would not say that so much as the whole shell game that everybody was playing with power, politics, marriages, money, the whole nine yards that was going on here. And with George R. R. Martin, I'm not sure whether... I feel like he took history's greatest hits of dynasties and put them all in one fantasy land. And I don't know whether to think that that's brilliant or whether that's lazy. I'm still trying to decide on that end of things. In all honesty, I actually have liked Fire and Blood, the book he did for the Targaryens, more than I have liked his actual series, the one that the Game of Thrones series that everybody knew him from. So can't prove it, but it feels like he definitely the Lannisters came from the Borgia family. Not even so much with the sibling relationship as it was with a father who is just cutthroat and trying to maneuver his family to the best of his abilities to gain power. And that's pretty much what Rodrigo Borgia, who became the Pope Alexander, was doing. He and specifically the one brother, the one that you would have heard of from the Borgias, Cersei, would have been the one that were doing the most maneuvering. Cersei was brilliant and incredibly ruthless when it came to taking over things, and he got more unsettled as he got older, mainly because he had syphilis. Several people in this book did, because the men were just messing everywhere that they should not have been, and there was a lot of unchecked venereal disease that was happening with all of this. So several people, you would say that some of their actions later on was caused by disease. Lucrezia, sadly enough, she herself seems like she had a lot of health issues, either brought on by a husband who had given her health issues, or also she seems like she always had kind of a weaker constitution. She was, though, very, very intelligent and very well suited to government and very well suited to what she did for her family. The Borgia family is interesting, and you do start to understand why all the rumors came about them having relations with each other, and that's very much because families at this time had this sort of arm's lengthness with a lot of family members, and the Borgias did not. They seemed to see themselves as the only people who could understand their family and the only people that their family could trust. And because of that, they had this really close relationship, which has either been misinterpreted in a certain way or could possibly have been true. It's hard to tell. The smear campaigns are so hard to sort through, and the author does go into detail that wouldn't have been completely unheard of at the time period, that something like that would have happened. The thing that wasn't true was Lucrezia being involved in anything that had to do with poison, ironically, because the rest of her family probably was, and several other families involved in all of this probably were. There was a lot of murder going on, though they tended to do a specific type. Cesare seemed to really like the strangling when it came to knocking off other family members. The third husband that Lucrezia had, that one really got into one of the messier family situations that if George R. R. Martin didn't know about any of this, he should have just done a historical thing of Lucrezia and the whole Borgia family, and it would have been fine, because those brothers all got having it out with each other. Keep in mind, this is not Lucrezia, this is not a Borgia, this is Lucrezia's third husband. His brothers are all having it out with each other. They're fighting over a woman. The one ends up getting waylaid on the road and someone tries to jab his eyes out. Like, the whole thing is just wild. The family politics that were happening in Italy at this time are crazy, that you just could not make it up. All these families battling with each other, battling in amongst themselves, trying to knock each other off to get where they think they need to be, trying to maneuver around to make alliances with different people. And then you've also got, people just randomly dying because disease and plague is prevalent at this time period too. Lucrezia is interesting, and this book is interesting in the fact that it goes kind of in who she had her affairs with, who she was very, very impressive, it appeared to be, to people, that she was able to maintain relationships and the respect of some pretty misogynistic men from this time period, and seemed to do a very good job of a balancing act of everything. I almost wish that this had been a little more focused specifically on her, because they do start going into great detail about a lot of the politics, and there are a lot of names in here. I mean, a lot of names in here to try to keep up with, specifically when they're all named the same thing. A lot of them, but just the family politics in and of itself is so out of pocket and so wild that this is worth reading just to get a view of what was going on in Italy at roughly the same time that Henry VIII, that was going on in England. And again, I keep bringing up George R. R. Martin because the whole time I was going through this, I kept thinking of Game of Thrones, because English politics, I guess because they were ruraler and they were not as tied to the Pope and Catholicism, their politics were a little more chill. They were more of a certain way, whereas the Italian politics were exactly what you saw in Game of Thrones, with all the families trying to maneuver with each other and make alliances and do all sorts of wild and crazy things. Which, keep in mind, Lucrezia, she had one marriage annulled. The second marriage, Cesare had her husband killed. And the third one, she lived out through, even though it was not a marriage she particularly wanted. And she had to, send her son by the second husband away and sort of pretend that he never existed. So Lucrezia is interesting because she was not a master of her own fate by any means. That was her family doing that. But she also seemed, wherever she was put, to make the best of her surroundings, to do the best that she could. And no one except her sister-in-law, who was very jealous of her, and they have a lot of letters between the people who were spying on Lucrezia and the sister-in-law who didn't like Lucrezia, and all this sort of thing going on, which are very interesting, kind of funny, because they're very, very petty. You have a lot of that that you're seeing of her being a very respected woman, which is interesting in the fact that she was illegitimate, and so were Cesare, so were all of Borgia, the Borgia children, because Alexander was the Pope. There was no way he was supposed to be getting married. But the alliances that they had and the power that they had and just the massive amounts of wealth you hear about when they're talking about what she's dressed in and what she brought as a dowry, and how they had the horses and gold saddles and all this sort of stuff. It's It is amazing. It is amazing. And it's what you think of when you think of fantasy novels, when they talk about this sort of political nonsense and things that go on in the royal or higher up families, which is very interesting to me that Italian history is not focused on as much as maybe English history, trying to be tied to fantasy novels and whatever, when the Italian history feels much more like what a lot of them are trying to do. A lot of the fantasy novels that are trying to be all political with what they're doing are trying to emulate what feels like Italian politics in here, because it is crazy. It is crazy. Somebody shouldn't even bothered with making Game of Thrones. They should have just made an actual TV show of the Borgias, not that soap opera-y one that they had a while back. I mean, one that literally was taking some of the history here and the people involved, because it is crazy. It is crazy in a way that you keep reading this book, even though the names are hard to keep up with and everything, just because of how wild the stories are as it keeps going. You're just like, there is no way. There is no way. There is no way that that person did. Oh, we just murdered another. Well, someone's eyes got jabbed out. Oh, now someone's poisoned. Oh, and now we've poisoned a husband and a wife at their own wedding, which, again, if you've read Game of Thrones, you should be aware of the wedding situations. Just craziness. Just craziness. And if you want some real Game of Thrones, but interestingly, not much poisoning from Lucrezia, a real Game of Thrones situation, this one by Sarah Bradford, I would very much stick with the names. Just try to sort out, keep going back to the family tree at the beginning, trying to figure out who everybody is, because it is well worth it in how crazy this real life situation actually was and what everybody was doing.